I still hear that coin hitting the table, even now. A tiny metallic sound, barely louder than a breath, yet somehow heavy enough to rearrange the rest of my life. It rolled in a small circle, wobbled, then fell flat with the softest clink. We joked about it, two grown men acting like kids deciding who gets the last slice of pizza. He laughed first, that loud, careless kind of laugh only someone with a clean heart can have. I laughed too, because why wouldn't I? It was supposed to be an ordinary night. Just another shift. Just another set of hours we'd drag ourselves through before grabbing breakfast and complaining about paperwork like always. But if I had known what the night would bring. God, if I had known. I would have taken the shift. No hesitation. No coin. No joke. I would have told him to go home, to sleep, to see his wife and his little boy. I would have taken the bullet. That thought has lived in me ever since, like a weight pressed gently against my ribs, never sharp enough to kill me, but too heavy to ever lift. People think guilt hits you like a punch, sudden and explosive, but it doesn't. It sits quietly. It whispers. It shows up in the small moments, when I'm putting on my boots, when I hear a radio crackle, when I drive past the diner where we used to stop after our shift. It shows up in my dreams too. In the dream, the coin never flips. It just stays in my hand, warm from my skin, and he's standing across from me saying, "Come on, man, don't think too hard," with that half smirk he wore whenever he felt lucky. But in the dream, I don't flip it. I tell him I've got the shift. And for a moment, a small, impossible moment, he nods, grabs his jacket, and walks out the door alive. When I wake up, I can almost hear his footsteps fading down the hallway. That's the thing about memory, it's cruel in how real it feels. Some nights I wonder if fate is just a word we use so we don't have to admit that one tiny decision can destroy everything. A flipped coin. A laugh. A shift trade. That was all it took. I didn't lose him in some big dramatic moment, I lost him in the casual space between two jokes. And the truth is so painfully simple that it cuts deeper every time I say it out loud. We flipped a coin. He lost his life. And I lost my peace. I wish that tiny metallic sound didn't echo in my head the way it does. I wish I could forget the clink. But some sounds stay with you forever. And that one became the start of everything I can't undo. My name is Daniel Reyes. For 12 years, I served on the force, and in that time, I learned a lot about the world, some of it good, most of it hard. But if there's one thing that job taught me more than anything else, it's that the people you stand beside matter just as much as the badge you wear. And for most of those years, I had a partner, Officer Mark Holloway. His name alone brings a kind of ache and warmth at the same time, like remembering the last good moment before everything changed. Mark wasn't just a colleague. He wasn't just someone I trusted with my life. He was my brother. Not by blood, but in every way that actually counts. If you've ever met someone whose presence makes you straighten up a little, someone who makes you want to be better without ever saying a word, that was Mark. He had this rare kind of heart, the kind that made you believe the world wasn't all bad, even when our job tried to convince us otherwise. And somehow, no matter what the night threw at us, sirens, screaming, rain pouring down our backs, he managed to find light in places most people wouldn't even look. I still remember the first time we were paired together. I walked into the briefing room half asleep, coffee in one hand, radio in the other, and there he was, leaning back in his chair, tapping a pen against his notepad, humming something that sounded like an old rock song. When the sergeant said, "Reyes, meet your new partner," Mark stood up, grinned like we'd known each other for years, and said, "Guess you're stuck with me." There was no awkward first-day stiffness, no guarded hesitation. It was like he'd already decided we were going to be friends. That was the thing about him, he made connection feel effortless. And in a job where your guard is usually welded to your bones, that was a gift. Mark had this calmness about him that didn't make sense. Even in the worst chaos, he carried himself like someone who believed, truly believed, that things could turn out okay. When we responded to domestic calls, he was the first to kneel down to a crying kid. When we pulled over drivers trembling with fear, he spoke to them like they were neighbors instead of strangers. And when we walked down streets where trouble lurked behind every dark corner, he walked with his shoulders relaxed, like he wasn't afraid of the darkness at all. He once told me, people mirror what they see. If we bring peace, maybe they'll feel a little of it too. I laughed when he said it, called him a philosopher trapped in a patrol car, but deep down I admired it. I admired him. He had a laugh that could break tension like snapping a wire. Not loud, not forced, just warm, real. And his smile, well, that smile saved me on nights when the world felt hopeless. There was this one time during a long stakeout, 5 hours of nothing but cold air and stale chips, when he started telling a story about his first day on the job. Halfway through, he messed up his own punchline, laughed so hard he choked on his coffee, and I swear we spent 10 minutes wheezing like idiots in a silent neighborhood at 3 a.m. That was Mark. He could make the darkest moments feel survivable. And then there was the way he talked about his family. His wife, Emily, he called her M, and their little boy, Noah, who was barely 4 when I met them. Mark showed me pictures like a proud kid showing off a science project. Every birthday, every drawing Noah made, every silly thing his son said, he treasured it all. Sometimes he'd pretend he wasn't tearing up when he watched videos of Noah running around the backyard. I never called him out on it. I knew those moments were the fuel that kept him soft in a world that tried to make men like us hard. You know, people think bravery looks like storming into danger with a fearless face. But Mark showed me that real bravery is waking up every day, knowing what the world can do to you, and choosing to be kind anyway. Choosing to see light when the job hands you nothing but darkness. He made me believe we were doing more than enforcing the law. He made me believe we were protecting hope, in small invisible ways most people would never notice. He was my partner. He was my brother. And losing him, well, that's a story that still shakes me when I try to tell it. But before all of that, before the coin, before the gunfire, he was simply the best man I ever knew. And that's where everything really begins. We had a rhythm when we worked, 2 halves of the same instinct, moving without needing to speak. When he went left, I went right. When he leaned in, I stepped back. When he saw danger, I felt it. And when I hesitated, he stepped forward with that steady confidence that always made me feel like no matter what happened, we'd walk out of every scene together. That rhythm wasn't something we practiced. It wasn't something they taught at the academy. It was something built in the quiet spaces between calls, in the countless hours of driving around the city with the windows rolled down, in the shared meals eaten on the hood of the patrol car at 2 in the morning. It grew from trust, and trust, real trust, is rare. But with Mark, it felt natural. There were nights when the city felt like it was breathing down our necks, when every shadow looked like a threat and every radio call carried the weight of something we couldn't predict. But even then, if Mark was beside me, I didn't feel fear the same way. He had this grounded way of standing his ground, like the earth itself had decided to hold him steady. I watched him talk down people 3 seconds away from violence. I watched him kneel beside people who didn't even want to see a cop, but somehow let him in anyway. He had a way of making people feel seen. And that included me. During patrols, he'd crack jokes at the worst possible times. Sirens blaring behind us, adrenaline pumping, and he'd say something like, "Bet you $5 this guy's excuse will be, my cousin borrowed my car." And he'd be right, every time. It was impossible to stay tense around him. Even after the worst calls, the ones that leave your hands shaking for hours, he'd bump his shoulder against mine on the walk back to the car and say, "We're still standing, partner." And somehow, that simple sentence always pulled me back together. Every time we clocked out after a rough shift, He'd nudge my shoulder and say, "One day we'll retire, old man. You and me, fishing by the lake." The first time he said it, I snorted and told him fishing was just sitting on a rock pretending not to be bored. He laughed and told me I'd be the one falling asleep with the rod in my hand. It became a running joke, his dream of us turning into wrinkled, sunburned retirees, arguing about bait and pretending the world hadn't once demanded everything from us. I used to laugh at him. Every time he brought it up, every time he added another detail, like how he'd grill the fish and I'd mess up the seasoning, I'd chuckle and shake my head. But deep down, I believed it. I believed we'd both make it to that day. The truth is, I think he believed in that dream more than I did. He talked about it like it was already waiting for us somewhere in the future. Like the world couldn't possibly rob us of something so simple, so pure. And when he talked about it, I let myself believe too. I let myself imagine that after all the darkness we walked through, there would be a quiet place at the end of the road. A small slice of peace we could actually claim. Sometimes on long patrol nights, he'd look out the window and say, "You ever think about life after this?" I'd shrug, pretend it didn't cross my mind. But he'd keep talking, describing this old wooden cabin by the water, the kind that creaked when you walked and smelled like pine and dust. He said Noah, his little boy, would visit on weekends, and we'd teach him how to cast a line. I never said it out loud, but hearing him talk like that made the world feel a little less harsh. It reminded me that we weren't doomed to a life of just running toward danger. That maybe, just maybe, we had something worth surviving for. And that's what hurts the most now. Not the badge, not the job, not the nights I wish I could rewrite. It's that I believed him. I believed we'd grow old, that we'd have that lake, that we'd sit side by side in silence, letting the world finally slow down. I believed we'd both make it there. But life, as I learned too late, doesn't always honor the promises you make in the quiet moments. And dreams can be taken from you in an instant. The night everything changed was supposed to be routine. Quiet. Boring even. The kind of shift you get through with coffee, small talk, and maybe one or two calls that barely make it into the report. Mark and I had been on double shifts all week, the kind that drain you so deeply you feel the tiredness in your bones, not just your muscles. My eyes felt gritty, my shoulders felt like they were carrying the whole city, and every time I blinked, it felt like my body was telling me to go home. But I had made plans, real plans, for once. Dinner reservations I'd been canceling for months, telling myself work came first, telling myself life could wait. Mark noticed the way I kept checking my watch, the way my knee bounced, the way I kept glancing toward the station clock like it had something personal against me. He didn't miss anything. Not when it came to me. He grinned at me from across the squad car, that stupid, confident smile of his, and said, "Go. I'll cover the rest of the shift. You deserve a night off." I shook my head immediately. No way. We started the shift together, we finish it together. It was automatic, instinctive, because that's how we'd always been. Two halves of one pattern. But he waved me off like I was being dramatic. "Relax, Daniel. I got this. Go eat your fancy dinner and pretend you're a normal human being for once." I told him no again. I told him 100 times that it was fine, that I'd stay, that the dinner could wait, that he didn't need to pick up my slack. But he shook his head, reached into his pocket, and pulled out a coin. I remember the way he held it up between his fingers, the dim station lights reflecting off the worn silver surface. "Heads you go, tails you go," he said with a smirk. "Either way, buddy, you're going." I laughed, because that was so painfully, perfectly him. Turning everything into a joke, even the things that mattered. I should have argued harder. I should have walked out of that station only after he walked with me. But I didn't. I let him flip it. I let that stupid little coin decide a night that should never have been decided by chance. He tossed it into the air with that careless flick of the thumb he did when he was trying to pretend something wasn't a big deal. The coin spun, catching the light in quick flashes, silver, shadow, and for a moment, time felt slow, like the universe was giving me one last chance to say no. But I didn't. I just watched it spin. It hit his palm, he slapped it onto the back of his hand, peeked, and grinned. "Heads," he said. "Now get out of here before I drag you out myself." He pointed at the door, laughing like he'd won something, like this was one more harmless moment between friends. And I, like an idiot, like a man who truly believed life wouldn't dare cheat him, I stood up. I grabbed my jacket. I told him I'd see him in the morning. I told him to text me if anything came up. I told him to be safe, but casually, lazily, like danger wasn't even a possibility that night. He gave me a salute, half joking, half sincere. And I remember the way he looked sitting there at the desk. Relaxed. Tired. Unaware that the world was already shifting under his feet. I turned toward the door, pushing it open like it was any other night. Like nothing would change the second it clicked shut behind me. I remember the cool air outside. The sound of distant traffic. The ordinary calm of a city that had no idea it was about to take someone irreplaceable. I walked through that door thinking I'd come back to the same partner I'd left behind. But the truth is, I never should have walked through it. Because the second that coin hit his hand, a line was drawn between the life I had and the life I was about to live. And I didn't know it then, but I was walking straight into a future that would never let me forgive myself. I made it 10 minutes into dinner before the radio cracked open with panic. I remember the warmth of the restaurant, the soft clatter of plates, the faint smell of garlic on the air. I remember trying, really trying, to relax for once, to pretend I knew how to live outside the uniform. But the moment that radio screamed to life from my hip, everything inside me snapped. Gunfire. Backup needed. Officer down. Those words didn't just hit me, they hollowed me out. The world froze. Every sound in that restaurant vanished as if someone had swallowed the noise whole. People around me were still talking, still laughing, still living their ordinary little lives, but for me everything tunneled down to one single thought: Mark. My chair hit the floor as I ran. I didn't even feel it leave my legs. 1 second I was sitting, the next I was moving, crashing into the cold night air outside. My badge slipped from my hand, clattering onto the pavement, but I didn't stop to pick it up. My breath tore out of me like broken glass as I sprinted to the car. I didn't even turn on the siren at first, I was shaking too hard to find the switch. My keys nearly fell out of my grip. My hands wouldn't listen to me. All I could think was, please don't let it be him, please don't let it be him, please don't let it be him. The second the engine roared to life, I slammed down the gas and the city blurred past me. I prayed the whole drive. I begged. I bargained with whatever might have been listening. I promised everything, my future, my peace, my soul, if it meant I'd get there in time. I said his name out loud like saying it would anchor him to the world a few minutes longer. I kept telling myself that calls sound worse than they are, that officers go down and get back up, that Mark was strong, that he was trained, that he wasn't the kind of man who would just disappear. But beneath all that panic was something deeper, darker, a feeling in my gut that didn't feel like fear, but loss. The kind you feel before your mind even understands what it's losing. Every red light blurred into streaks. Every siren around me seemed to scream with the same desperate plea I had in my chest. When dispatch repeated, "Officer down," I slammed my hand against the wheel so hard my knuckles split. I don't even remember half the drive. I must have run lights, cut corners, nearly hit pedestrians, but all I can remember is repeating his name like a lifeline. "Hold on, Mark. Hold on. I'm coming." When I turned the final corner and saw the pulsing red and blue lights painting the street, my heart dropped so violently it felt like my ribs cracked around it. Police tape. Panicked voices. Shadows moving too fast. And in the middle of it, a shape on the ground covered by frantic hands and desperate attempts. I slammed the car into park while it was still moving and stumbled out, legs barely working. Someone yelled at me to stay back, but I pushed through them like a man drowning for air. And then I saw him. Mark's body on the pavement. His uniform darkened by blood that had no right to be there. Officers trying to save him, their voices sharp and tired and terrified. And for a moment, just a moment, I believed he was going to sit up, shake it off, crack a joke about ruining his shirt. But he didn't move. He didn't even breathe. My legs gave out. They didn't fold gently, they collapsed like they belonged to someone else. I hit the ground beside him, the asphalt biting into my knees, my hands shaking as they reached for him. Someone tried to pull me back, but I grabbed onto his vest and refused to let go. His skin was cold. Too cold. The kind of cold you don't come back from. Everything inside me broke in that moment. Every dream, every plan, every stupid fishing joke, every promise of a future where we made it out alive, they all died right there with him, under the flashing lights, under the weight of a night that should have been routine. And all I could think, over and over, was that I should have been there. I should have taken the shift. I should have taken the bullet. People say the hardest part of this job is the moment you face danger. They say it's the bullets, the chaos, the screams, the seconds that stretch into something that feels like eternity. They're wrong. The hardest part is living with the moments you weren't there. The moments when your phone was in your pocket, when your hands were clean, when you were breathing easy, while someone else paid the price for your absence. That's the kind of pain that doesn't fade. It settles into you, into the corners of your mind, into the cracks of your memories, until even your happiest moments feel like they're built on broken ground. I knelt beside him. I didn't even remember moving. 1 second I was staring in disbelief, the next my knees were hitting the pavement so hard I should have felt pain, but I didn't. Not physical pain, anyway. My whole world narrowed to him. Mark. My partner. My brother. His eyes were still open, still searching for something, someone, as if he was trying to anchor himself to the last bit of the world he had left. I held his hand, gripping it like if I held tight enough, I could keep him here. I kept whispering his name, telling him I was there, telling him he wasn't alone, telling him to stay with me, even though a part of me already knew he couldn't hear me. Or maybe he could, maybe the soul hears things the body can't. So I kept talking, kept holding his hand, kept hoping that somewhere in the fading echoes of his awareness, he felt me showing up too late. His fingers, they didn't squeeze back. They didn't twitch. They didn't move. His chest wasn't rising. His lips were parted, but no breath came through. His eyes, God, those eyes that used to light up with jokes, with hope, with life, were already fading into that empty stillness that no amount of training can prepare you to see. I knew he was gone. Anyone could have seen it. But I still begged for another second, another sign, another impossible miracle. I kept waiting for him to blink, to breathe, to do anything except lie there while the lights painted the world in grief. My mind kept replaying the same single truth over and over until it felt like it was carving itself into the inside of my skull. It should have been me. Those words became the air I breathed, the heartbeat in my chest, the only truth big enough to swallow everything else. It was supposed to be my shift. My call. My life on the line. I was the one who should have walked into that scene. I was the one who should have faced whatever waited in the shadows. I was the one who should have heard the gunfire and reacted. Instead, I was standing over his. Every part of my training told me to pull myself together, to focus, to stay professional. But training means nothing when the world is breaking in front of you. My hands were shaking so violently I had to hold them against my chest just to keep them steady. My throat burned from the mix of screaming and silence. My heartbeat felt like it was slamming against my ribs, begging to burst free from a reality it didn't want to belong to. People around us were moving, voices calling codes, radios crackling, officers shouting instructions, but all of it sounded like it was happening from underwater. Slow, muffled, distant. The only thing that felt real was that cold pavement beneath my knees and the weight of his hand in mine. I kept thinking about the stupid coin. That tiny spinning piece of metal that I laughed at, that I trusted, as if fate was something you could decide with a flip. I kept seeing it in the air, flashing silver, choosing for us. Choosing wrong. Choosing death. And it didn't matter how many times people would later tell me that I couldn't have known, that it wasn't my fault, that he made the choice. None of that mattered. Because I knew the truth. I knew it deeply, painfully, completely. I wasn't there. And because I wasn't there, he died alone on a street meant for me. And that is a truth I still haven't learned how to live with. In the days that followed, people tried to help. They brought food, flowers, cards with soft colors and even softer words. They hugged me, touched my shoulder, spoke in those careful tones people use when they're afraid of breaking something even more than it's already broken. They meant well, God, I know they did, but grief has a way of making the world sound distant, like everyone is speaking through walls, like every voice is slightly underwater. You hear them, but the words don't land. They float. They drift. They fade before they reach anything inside you. I nodded through conversations I can't remember, accepted condolences that felt too light, too thin to hold the weight sitting on my chest. I was there, but not really. My body showed up. My heart didn't. It stayed on that street with him. The department held a ceremony. They always do. It's tradition, honor, respect, words that sound strong until you're the one standing under the flagpole with your hands trembling and your throat locked tight. I sat in the front row, surrounded by uniforms, the polished shoes, the pressed collars, the badges reflecting the morning sun. Someone read his name. Someone read his years of service. Someone read a speech about bravery and sacrifice. It was beautiful, I guess. Or at least people told me it was. I couldn't hear most of it. All I heard was the memory of his laugh. All I saw was the way his eyes crinkled when he talked about his kid. All I felt was the ghost of a man who should have been standing beside me, joking about how he hated formal events. When they folded his flag, I watched every crease, every turn, every slow deliberate movement. That flag felt like it contained his entire life, 12 years of service, every sunrise patrol, every call we answered together, every promise we made to each other in the middle of chaos. And then they handed me his badge. Someone's voice said words I don't remember, something about honor, something about sacrifice, but the moment that cold metal touched my palm, I felt the full weight of everything I'd been trying not to feel. It nearly crushed me. It wasn't heavy in the literal sense, a badge weighs almost nothing. But in that moment, it felt like holding a piece of him. A piece I didn't deserve. A piece that reminded me of every second I wasn't there. I closed my fingers around it because I didn't know what else to do. My hand shook so hard I had to steady it against my leg. The whole ceremony blurred around me, faces, voices, uniforms blending together into a smear of color and noise. All I could think about were the small decisions that lead to tragedy. How people always imagine tragedy as some giant force crashing in without warning, but sometimes, it's quiet. Sometimes it's simple. Sometimes it's a line of tiny choices that seem harmless until the last one shatters everything. One coin. One flip. One night. That's all it took. One moment of laughter. One moment of me stepping toward the door instead of away from it. One moment of trusting luck to decide something that never should have been left to chance. I kept replaying it in my mind, the coin spinning, flashing in the air, landing in his hand. How I didn't question it. How I let fate make a choice I should have made myself. People told me it wasn't my fault. They told me I couldn't have known. They told me he insisted. But none of that changed the truth that lived inside me like a blade I couldn't pull out. I left, and he stayed. I walked away, and he walked into his last call. After the ceremony, people lined up to shake my hand, offer condolences, share stories. I nodded. I thanked them. But inside, I felt hollow. Empty. Like grief had carved out everything but the echoes of what should have been. I drove home with his badge still in my hand, the edges digging into my skin. I didn't let go. I couldn't. Because by then, it wasn't just a badge. It was the last piece of a promise we were supposed to keep together. A promise to survive the job. A promise to grow old. A promise we never got to fulfill. And all I could think, over and over, was how fragile a life can be. How everything can change because of a single, tiny, innocent moment. One coin. One flip. One night. I visit him every week now. Same time. Same place. Rain, sun, cold wind cutting through my jacket, it doesn't matter. I make the drive anyway. I walk the same path through the cemetery, past rows of names that remind me how many stories ended too soon, until I reach his. I kneel beside his grave, brush the leaves away, polish his badge until it catches the light again. It's strange how something so small can hold so much weight. I talk to him like he never left. I don't whisper. I don't hide the cracks in my voice. I just talk, the way I used to when he sat across from me in the squad car with a donut in one hand and the radio in the other. Sometimes I tell him about the new rookies messing up paperwork, the ones who panic over forms he could have filled out blindfolded. I imagine him laughing at that, shaking his head, saying, "Kids these days." Sometimes I tell him about the dreams I still have, the ones where he walks into the precinct smiling, coffee in hand, asking why I always look so serious. In those dreams, he looks alive. Real. Solid. And for a few seconds after waking, I almost believe he's still here. But mostly, I tell him the truth. The truth I never had the courage to say out loud when he was breathing beside me in the patrol car. The truth that he saved my life. Not just by taking that shift, though God knows that alone is more than anyone should have to repay, but by teaching me what honor, duty, and brotherhood really mean. He showed me that strength doesn't always come from the loud moments, but from the quiet choices. The choice to protect. The choice to hope. The choice to believe in people even when they don't believe in themselves. He died for the badge, but he also died for me. And that truth sits with me every day, heavy, unmovable, stitched into every breath I take. I carry it like a shadow that never steps away, a reminder of what I owe him and what I lost the moment I let that coin decide our future. I'll carry that truth, and that guilt, for the rest of my days. Some sacrifices can never be repaid. Some losses never fully heal. You learn to stand again, you learn to breathe again, but you never become who you were before. Grief reshapes you. It hollows out your chest and fills it with echoes of moments you wish you could rewrite. But if you've ever had someone who would have taken a bullet for you, hold them close. Tell them what they mean to you. Don't assume they already know. Don't wait for a better moment, a quieter day, a time when life isn't so busy. Because one day, without warning, the chance disappears. And all you're left with are the words you never said and the memories you replay until they blur around the edges. If this story touched your heart, let me know in the comments. And if you've ever lost someone you weren't ready to lose, you're not alone. Not in the silence. Not in the guilt. Not in the nights when you wake up reaching for someone who isn't there. There are others carrying the same invisible weight, the same impossible ache. Subscribe for more stories, stories where love, loyalty, and sacrifice still matter. Stories that remind us that even in a world that feels cold sometimes, there are still people worth fighting for, worth remembering, worth carrying with us long after they're gone. And as for me, well, what happened the next month changed my life all over again. A different kind of night. A different kind of decision. A moment I never saw coming. But that's a story for another night.